Hey everybody, I'm Nico.
And I'm TK, and this is my jam.
He's jamming, and that makes this X's for Comics, your one and only comics podcast where we talk about comics. And it's really interesting because the show just changed titles, kind of revised canon there, sort of pulled a retcon. But yeah, we're here talking comics, and I'm excited because the Wednesday, so that's something.
It's hump day.
I think for me, the thing about talking about like comics on a Wednesday, you haven't had a chance to digest them yet, right? And so like one of the things that hits me sometimes when I'm talking about comics, like the day they came out, is that I'm kind of feeding off of immediately my jump reaction. And I know that I'm going to have a totally different reaction afterward, right? But like one of the things that gets me pretty hard when I'm talking about these books is that like I listen back to myself when I'm like going through to package this out or whatever. And sometimes by the end of the episode, I already have a totally different opinion. And so it just gets kind of fascinating when you're talking about these books and like how they take some time to absorb. I actually kind of feel like, we revise canon as much as they do.
Yeah. Psychologically, we got to work through it and have the experience. And I think sometimes that's good with comics. I think we're in a particularly privileged place to get the chance to get up here and talk to each other. So many comics fans, sadly, are kind of either siloed and they kind of read by themselves, or, if they're not, they're kind of in the very online go and post about it fandom rather than, sitting and talking through it and having a conversation and maybe trying to connect things to things and, having a theme for the day to sort of think about issues around. Because, we had, theme for today is revising canon, but we had two big Jean Grey books today. And not that Jean Grey is a theme, but we could have ended up talking about just like Jean Grey doing Phoenix stuff again. And I think that episode, if we were to focus on Giant-Size and Phoenix 12, that episode might be very different than an episode where we're kind of talking about Giant-Size from a lens that has to do with very different things. Although there is, some revised canon in Phoenix 12.
And so that is like one of the things that's like, when is it a retcon? When is it a revision, right? Like sometimes it works, sometimes it's, dead on. And like we say in the description, like sometimes it's Jean Grey was never Phoenix. And then sometimes it's Jean Grey was never Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And so like it works, it doesn't work. For me, I think like with this Giant-Size lineup, and I love that you brought up the books you brought up already. With this Giant-Size lineup, what works for me is I would love for them to believably retcon parts of Marvel canon and history. What doesn't work for me is they're not doing it here.
Well, they are probably not doing it here.
They're probably not doing it here. Breaking my heart is what they're doing.
We don't know. And I think that's not a good thing. I'm not saying we don't know, like, hey, you never know. We don't know, like, we can never trust your mission. You never tell us what you're doing. And then, so one of the things I was thinking about is it very well may be that at the end of all this, and for a number of issues, for a number of months afterwards, they will say, oh yeah, when we went to get the original X-Men from Krakoa and Kamala was there, as she always was. And the X-Men will say in the next few months, oh, when Kamala was there during the Age of Apocalypse. But 10 years from now, when those events are recounted again, somebody will forget that was a thing and Kamala won't have been there, or they'll change things up again. So, I mean, it feels like one of the ways that this could go is sort of a Sentry-esque, we're trying to change things so that Kamala was always there and so that she can continue to be a flagship character. And I believe that is a possible intention, and it's one that might show up in present day continuity, and people will say like, oh, Kamala was there. Even if they acknowledge that it's because she went back in time, they'll say, all my memories are of being Storm going to rescue the original X-Men from Krakoa and talking to Kamala. But that will just as easily get forgotten in the same way that we will see major events in Marvel canon that Marvel said Bob the Sentry was there for. And everybody remembers that, and that's just how reality is. But he's not there because he wasn't there, and nobody cares anymore because they gave up on the Sentry project.
And I love that you're saying that people will react to remembering Kamala being there, because I wonder about the other parts of Kamala being there. Like, what about Jean gave up the Phoenix, lost it to Legion? Legion had it, then gave it back to Jean. Like, is that going to be part of the memory set now? And like,
right.
If it is, cool. But like, you know, when Marvel pitches, or DC, your good friends, your teachers, when somebody pitches a really big idea, real big, right? And then you get it. And like, I even love the art on this, but the art on these giant size sort of feel like they fall off. Like, this does not feel like by the time they finished producing issue number 2, they were still treating it with the loving prestige that they had begun the project with.
I don't know, because Adam Kubert never quite does it for me. And since that's what we started with for issue 1, you know, Rod Race is very, I kind of maybe wish we'd even switched and done Rod Race for the first, just because he's got the very, actually it's funny, like his style to me is very watercolor, which is where we're going for our DC book this week. And it was just funny to me artistically that they kind of matched up. But I don't know, this one gave me a lot of personal passion, I guess I want to say. Issue 1 felt really house style. That's really where it felt like really, like this feels like a really big concept that should be a little bit explosive and a little bit chaotic, and maybe in some ways like ill-advised. And the Kubert style was very like, let's keep it clean, let's not go outside the lines. And so this one feeling a little more like the colors are all over the place, the lines are a little bit less defined. It made a certain amount of sense to me.
Yeah, I really vibe that. I feel like I think it even has to do with like where these books go in canon and like how I feel about those stories. So the Giant Size X books are Kamala Khan, like we've been saying, Kamala Khan thrown into famous moments in X history. As much a primer for new MCU fans as anything for some X-Men stories I guess they could expect on the big screen. But the other thing this propels us to consider is, what is the value of doing this? What is the value of going back to the Dark Phoenix Saga and like revisiting it with Kamala Khan, right? And I actually really love the idea that the art here is personally, emotionally responsive, because then it's like the art is part of the purpose. We're seeing this moment again with new art, with art that is responsive to the art. You know, one of the first things I said when we started this 9 minutes ago was, when I react to these books, I'm reacting same day. I haven't had a chance to process them yet. These artists are processing them with 40, 50 years of canon. So like, it's such a cool way to look at it. And I really appreciate that take so much. It also makes me kind of wonder, why then is the story so paint by the numbers? I earlier was thinking about the fact that I really don't like ABBA's music, like at all. So I guess what I'm saying is I really enjoy Mamma Mia for the plot, which is worse somehow.
Well, first off, you're saying you enjoy Mamma Mia.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay. So yes, if you don't like the music of ABBA, you would be enjoying that movie for the plot.
And the play. I've seen the play too. I really enjoy the end where they do Waterloo. Like, that's one of my favorite parts, but I hate Waterloo. So
that's wild.
it's really, it sucks. It's what it is. It sucks. But I bring this up because, like, I think what I guess I'm trying to say is in a situation like that, you sort of like love parts of it, but not the whole thing. And you're kind of like, I like the part of the package, but not the package. And I kind of feel like with a story like this, it's so kind of paint by the numbers, but it doesn't have Meryl Streep singing ABBA to save it. And it's a little too by the numbers. Like, when you go back in time to retell something, make it exciting. This isn't exciting at the moment.
So I will agree with you that it's not exciting, unfortunately. Big bummer it's not exciting. To me, it doesn't feel by the numbers. And maybe the problem is that it's not by the numbers. So like the big thing is, why are we doing this? What's the purpose here? This is not the Dark Phoenix Saga. This is Kamala shows up at a very specific moment, but also a somewhat non-specific moment. And it just interrupts the story that you already know happened if you're a comics reader. So if you're an MCU fan, this doesn't help. Like already in terms of like accessing the Dark Phoenix Saga, this doesn't help. But then on top of that, like throwing Legion into the mix, and then it's a confusing version of Legion. Like I would have just made it Apocalypse, or like somebody who you could just be like, oh, the villain is just here. But the fact that they keep having to be like, it's actually, I'm not David, I am just what was inside David, and David's in the white hot room, which don't even get me started on what that is. So like that's not good. That's not going to help anybody. I get it. I like it kind of. I could, but I don't know. This also isn't for me because I didn't ask for. I would have been fine with Kamala just them being like, "Hey, you are the coolest new X-Man, and you can just be in the X-Men now." Like that would have worked for me. I get that, they want to really weave her into the universe, and I like the idea of that project. But does this do that for us? No, not really. I mean, kind of, but like, what it will do is allow everybody to, in the present day, be like, "Well, Kamala, you were there with me my whole life." Jean will be able to say, "When I was younger and couldn't control the Phoenix and was crying at my bedside, you came and held me," which is lovely. Don't get me wrong. It's beautiful. Love the instinct of that. But I think for me emotionally to really invest 3 or 4 issues, I need of that specifically. Like I would want Dark Phoenix Saga to be 3 or 4 issues. I would want, Age of Apocalypse to be 3 or 4 issues with Kamala really accessing the thing. Her showing up for 32 pages and being like, "Hey, I just showed up when you're all yelling at her, and let's stop yelling." And then meanwhile there's also a very confusing villain plot happening that immediately goes intergalactic. And then the X-Men, I also thought the cafeteria scene was really great because it's like moments that we never got from the original, but also it's basically 2 pages. They're good pages. It's a really good instinct, but again, I maybe wish that was more like 4 pages, and then every other scene was a little bit longer and spilled over into another issue at least. I do, like I said, I love the idea that Jean could come back to Earth from the Phoenix book that is presently running and say, I have such great memories of you, Kamala. Thank you for helping me. Like I wouldn't be the Phoenix that I am today without you helping me. That's really cool. This is really not accessible to new readers, and old readers like me probably need a little bit more out of you to be like, yeah, man, this did it. This project happened.
And it's actually really funny because I'm going to kind of jump a little bit here.
Jump.
The backup story was not okay. It wasn't.
Oh, it was,
how is it really, a fucking revelation?
Yeah.
That's it. That's the whole question. How is that a revelation story? The last revelation story is there's secretly a Super Moira doming Xavier in his subconscious.
Yeah.
This revelation story is Jean will always psychically hug Scott. That's even boring for straight people.
Yeah. Honestly, I read this issue the first time, and I just thought that was a preview for the Phoenix book, so I turned it off. And then when I went back to take notes, it was one of those things where like I accidentally kept reading, and I was like, oh no, this is actual new material. But this to me reads a little bit more like something you would give to somebody coming from the MCU or coming from an interest in Kamala but not knowing about the X-Men, to teach them about just Jean Grey.
Yeah.
And it's lovely. It's a perfectly lovely little summary of Jean will always love Scott. I think that so does not matter anymore. And again, this is one of those new and old things. I think for new fans, while this is very cool for telling them who Jean is, I don't think a lot of new fans, I think everybody in the world knows who Jean Grey is. I don't know who needs a primer on Jean, but sure. But I think it's boring now that Jean loves Scott. And I mean, it's, the Krakoan era was so fun because that it was taken for granted that Jean would always love Scott and Scott would always love Jean. And now what do we do? Because what do you do in a world where you are trying to have everything and level up your culture? You expand your idea of what romance and love are and who your partners are. And, we got to see some beautifully rendered Lucas Vernick images of our darling Emma, of Madeline Pryor, Logan's in the mix, young Jean's there. Them taking care of baby Nathan, but the real story of what Jean Grey loves and who Jean Grey loves is so much bigger than that page. And so then reducing it to she will always love Scott is just kind of that's always where we've gotten so boring with X-Men. That's always where those people got married in 1994, and that was the last cool thing. And then Going to the Future was cool. After they came back from their honeymoon, they became that straight couple that gets boring. And then the person that realized that was Grant Morrison, and
their divorce was fantastic.
The best divorce ever, except for the one that I have planned. Not for my personal life, for Marvel Comics. It was a really good. Everything since then has been good. This wasn't a backup story. It was a primer for nobody.
And it's sort of where I'm what is game changing about that? How is that a fucking revelation? And why wasn't this written by the same person writing the Phoenix book or writing Scott's book or who wrote the main story? Who was this for? And then the other part of it that I kind of get stuck on is in everything that you're saying, right? We get this story that tells us we knew nothing about the Phoenix. We understood nothing about the Phoenix. But this story doesn't change anything. Boop. The way Dark Phoenix Saga happened? No, it didn't. Okay, but it doesn't change anything. Jean is still exactly Jean. What? And then, now, readers, listeners, follow-alongers, watchers, lovers, in the background, we're not just AI, we're people, right? And so we were talking, getting this episode all set up, and TK pitched a great episode, and I just was not read up enough on it. But one of the things that I do want to pick up on for just half a second, because we're going to do that episode, I did find in a recent Marvel anthology that was supposed to be about specific characters, it was amazing how often the story featured that character but was about someone else, and how often the pinups that revealed those characters gave that away, or gave away how limited the character was. These depictions of Jean and Scott's relationship, while very cool and very pinup-y, exactly as you said, I don't need Phantom X to be on the list of Jean's all-time greatest lovers, but it's egregious to me that a man is given multiple lovers And the woman the story is supposed to be about has one character pointed out for her who's arguably a bigger character than her. It felt like, then why?
Yeah, I mean, then why is a really big part of all this. There's also the fact that, like, we just got off of a year of doing some really big Phoenix work that I frankly did not love all of it. I really like Karen. It's not that I didn't love all of it. It's just I thought that, like, we were working on a completely different project, and then Kieran Gillen and Al Ewing kind of came in and were like, we want to do this instead. I get it, guys, but, like, sometimes I just don't know why we let people run roughshod creatively. We did a lot of work about what the Phoenix, and we're doing it. Stephanie Phillips is doing it now in the pages of Phoenix. Like, there's a lot of work happening about what Phoenix is, what she's for, who Jean is for, Jean Grey's family. What is the White Hot Room? What are we doing there? Like, all of these things. So it's really weird to me that, we're talking about how David is the host of Legion, is in the White Hot Room, which is essentially like, it started out really as a place of incubation for the Phoenix. Basically, it's where the Phoenix goes when it's not in corporate, it's not in a host, and that's how kind of Grant Morrison wrote it. And it has become kind of a more expansively defined thing. But it's odd that the guy who is partially a person who is in the White Hot Room, which is the Phoenix's home, gets control of the Phoenix and is like, I just want to go there to yell at somebody. But we don't do any, like, cosmogenical sort of talk about the fact that, like, the Phoenix is literally trying to get into its home and the weird effects that would have. And it is only odd to me specifically because we had these really galaxy brain writers coming in to talk about universe mechanics and, like, huge ideas of what the Phoenix is and what it's for and what would happen if the Phoenix was doing certain things, and how the Phoenix can go outside of time to fight a Nathaniel Essex outside of time because of the mechanics of how it works, and the White Hot Room being a huge part of that. And then this issue is like, oh yeah, all those elements exist, but we just want to yell at a guy. And, like, it's very life-threatening that we want to yell at a guy. And again, I kind of go back to my thoughts about Doctor Doom. It's like, once Doctor Doom fought the Beyonders, it's not impressive to me that he wants to take over the UN. Once the Phoenix went outside of time to fight Dominions, I'm never going to be sold on, like, oh, she wants to go to, like, her extra spatial plane just to yell at someone. That doesn't feel big to me. And then you end it in one issue anyway, without really ever the ramifications of what all that would mean should matter. And if Gillen and Ewing were writing this book, I think they probably would have. I think it would have been a lot more about that. But because it's now Hive Mind, it's Lanzig and Kelly, it doesn't matter, which is very funny because that's the legacy of Gillen and Ewing taking over the X books and being like, everything that came before we wrote it doesn't matter. Now we're focusing on the Phoenix. And so we're just we get into this cycle of, like, hey, everybody buy these books and invest because we're going to tell you some really cool story. We're not done with that story, but we're going to let new guys on. Don't worry. They love the source material. And the new guys go, yeah, no, I don't give a single shit. I want to write my own thing. And here we go.
And, I'm so glad that Krakoa came up because Krakoa is one of the biggest retcons ever. It's one of the biggest canon revisions of all time. Yeah. But so many of us are willing to die on that hill when other revisions, other retcons, just as big or much smaller, are huge problems. And I think part of that kind of even makes me think about Hickman's original pitch that we've never gotten to understand. We've never gotten it. He's never told us part 2 or part 3. It seems like it was leaning magic, maybe. I don't know. Maybe the third one would have leaned tech. I don't know. But, like, he was telling a story that, like, evidently he wanted to leave Krakoa behind after a year. Krakoa was, like, part 1 of a 3-part plan or a 5-part plan. And he only got so far before the success forced the creatives to kind of alter what he was doing alongside COVID, alongside a number of other concerns, including evidently him getting opportunities with Marvel Television for Gods. And what it really makes me think about is, even if they said to him now, Hickman, go ahead, do your Krakoa. We're going to give you your own title, and it's going to be called House of X, and you're just going to publish House of X and Powers of 10 twice a month. You get these books till you tell what it would have been in your original story. He'd never be able to tell it the same way, because when you're forced to tell it in the confines of the Marvel universe, you kind of have to behave like other people matter. But when it's your own canon, you'll do whatever you want, and you can't help that that's what your brain does. And I feel like I can think of a few examples of where Marvel has sort of let that happen to give a writer what they want. But like, the other part of it is how often Marvel tells us, well, the past can't change. That's the whole bit, isn't it? So when they tell us this, like, I think about Age of Ultron and Secret Wars, and I think about how, like, where's the revision? Where's the lasting change? Because we don't actually go back to status quo. We go back to whatever the populace wants now. And so, I don't know. I feel like we're in a tough spot, because, like, I want to see these. I do kind of want to see massive revisions, because part of the problem is, as we bring up a lot, okay, Magneto can be a Holocaust survivor in a number of ways. One of which, for me, is shortly after he escapes, as an adult, he freezes in age. Like, he's absorbed into the magnetic pull of the earth and is spat out 40 years later. So he can know Charles Xavier. Sure. And then Gabrielle Haller can be the child of a Holocaust survivor who has never had a home and has been, nomadic. Fine. But because I need those. Or Magneto can't keep being a Holocaust survivor and have grown up with these people, right? But then there's ones that I don't need. I don't need people to secretly have always been siblings. I also don't like when person who makes no sense as queer is queer out of nowhere. And that has nothing to do with, like, late in life gays that when they come out are like, or like, late in life, any of the other letters, people who transition late in life, people who come out as bi late in life. I'm not here to judge. Comics have something that the real world doesn't, and that's internal narration. You see, I cannot simply look at TK and know exactly what he's thinking. It's just not possible. But comic book characters, I have that. So, like, the depth of character and mental sense it would take to convince me somebody was queer all along, it's not on the page. So, like, that's a revision that you have to handle really carefully for me. But if you want to go ahead and tell me that somebody time traveled one time back 300 years, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I don't mind resets either. I can see that DC has gone overboard and now lives overboard. They live in the water. They do not live on the ship when it comes to resetting the universe and deciding which thing actually happened. And I don't want Marvel to do that. But Marvel has never had a reset. They've never had a the only, Heroes Reborn could have maybe gotten us there, but it was literally, they were shunted off to another a pocket universe and then came back, and they all have a memory of that time they went to a pocket universe. Battle World and the end of all universes concludes with Reed being like, Franklin, just reset everything back to how it was. It's not, that was the perfect time to say. And what's really wild is you could even have said back then, Franklin reset everything to how he was, but Franklin's fucking 8 years old. He didn't do a great job. Like, that would have been the perfect time to say, like, oh, any weird thing, Franklin. For one thing, it can always be Franklin, but like, that was a really specific moment where literally Franklin picks up the universe and throws it into the air. And Reed just goes, make it like it was, buddy. Like the world's shittiest dad telling a dumb kid what to do. And we can't ever imagine that maybe things are a little different because of that. And what a great time to pick like many different things and go, oh yeah, it actually happened. You know, I know you remember it happened one way, but Franklin put the universe back and this is how it happened. It's so weird to me that they didn't choose to do that with one single thing. Like they didn't even make up a Sentry type character who they were like, oh yeah, he had always been there. We know he hadn't been, but Franklin fucked up when he put the universe back. Completely squandered opportunity. There's just so much stuff now with Marvel that one universe reset in 60 years. And again, it doesn't need to be like, now everything is completely different. Now everything happened specifically after 2012 or something like that. It can really just be, yeah, it's mostly the same, but because of a little cosmic sneeze, you're going to notice some things are different. And seeing that DC has not really lost notable traction from the fact that they will be like, oh yeah, complete universe reset and everything is completely different. You will not notice a little change here and there. You will notice everything is completely different than how it was. And people keep going back to it. It just really tells me that like, Marvel, you could do it. Well, you could use the tool one time and you kind of need to at this point.
You know, I really agree because I'm frustrated that I know that we're all made of our more attractive and ugly parts. You know, that's what it is, right? But like, what I don't love is that I have to make room for Gambit killed a bunch of Morlocks. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Now he works for Sinister. Now he works for Apocalypse. Now he's Summer's brother. Now he's a clone. Now none of that's true. Now all of it's true. Now he's a child and was cloned with some DNA. Now he's got magic. Like, it's just a little too much sometimes. And what I feel like happens is like Richter is a great example of a character who, when he's not being trotted out to be queer, just doesn't get trotted out very often, right? He's just sort of like a gay show pony. And then they took away his powers with M-Day. Then they gave him new magic powers. And he's got his powers, sort of. And you could probably just reset him to having magic. A mutant with magic. Earth mutant magic. I don't know how you want to do it. But, like, that's a character that does not need all of the trauma porn that's been thrust upon him. And that's a character that if you brought the Marvel Universe back, just simplify his shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Wolverine. Wolverine has been everywhere at all times, which at this point has gotten to, it's basically boring. I mean, like it's I love that you have this character that, like, kind of the joke is that he can be everywhere, but it's also just like maybe we reset and just don't always do that. Like, we don't, I mean, because so many of the stories are also from like very, very post Cold War. Like, everybody wants a guy who was there for everything, you know, who was there for Vietnam, who was there for Korea. I think nobody would care if Wolverine was not present for Korea or Vietnam publishing comics today, and he could still be everywhere. You know, he still can kind of say, I've seen it all. I've been to Madripoor and I've traveled the globe.
Clearly he's Forrest Gump.
Truly. Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, in so many ways, great and small. And that's not even like the worst thing ever, but it's just like, now it's just too much stuff to remember. And it's too many people that you're like, oh, well, of course, everybody remembers his buddy Gloobity Glob from that time. No, I don't remember, and I don't care, and I don't think you should use that guy anymore because he's like a really weird, racist Korean veteran trope that nobody needs. So yeah, I mean, you know, there's a bunch of resetting that can happen, and it's so funny because I pointed out to you a small story that appears in the pages of Giant-Size Amazing Spider-Man this week, and it's all about how the upcoming in 5 days 6/16. June 16th is Eternity Day. And it's, you know, Marvel is Earth 616. And so it's this little story about Eternity being like calling to Spider-Man and being like, hey, save the universe. And Spider-Man meets up with the dude from Gods, who okay, this guy's here all the time now, which I guess like if he's our key to doing a hard reset or something, I'll eat that guy up. I don't care, whatever. Spider-Man and that guy team up to go back to what he points out in a very third wall breaking way, but also in like an in-universe way. The creation of the android Human Torch is the beginning of the Marvel universe. That is publishing wise the case. That's what Marvel wants you to take away. But then he says, actually, in universe, this was the start of your universe as well. And what he's essentially talking about is because of the, branching trees of multiversity, this tree branched off when the Human Torch was created. So that's the start of your universe. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, cute idea, but it's a very it's revising canon, it's revisiting canon, and it's sort of reminding canon. It's really reminding us about the base layers. And I think that's really cute and cool. Like, it's just this little story about how Spider-Man, shows up to the beginning of the Marvel universe and just makes sure that it happens. And that's great. That's very Spider-Man. Of course, he's the most iconic hero. Of course, in the same way that we want Kamala Khan to have been there for all the X-Men's adventures because she was a mutant. We want Spider-Man to have been there at the birth of the Marvel universe because he's the iconic character. But what could we really do with ideas like that? It's cute for a Spider-Man one-off, I know, but it features one of the abstract entities who also, by the way, is possessing Storm right now. And Al Ewing's writing that. So that also feels like another wrinkle. It's got the guy from Gods who's high up in the, magicosphere. It's got the iconic character Spider-Man. What could we really do if we wanted to actually move things forward and make some big changes using story elements like this, instead of just, throwing Kamala Khan back through the X-Men's adventures and sort of nebulously saying, well, she might have always been there unless we forget or decide something different happened.
And it actually almost makes me think about when one of those big DC resets you're mentioning happened, mm-hmm. New 52. Mm-hmm. That first month they published, and I want to say I think it was Fabian Nicieza, or it might have been Tim Rice. I always forget which one of Elton John's collaborators it was. No, I think it was Fabian Nicieza was writing Robin, and he wrote that Robin in the first issue, it's like Robin had been Batman's Robin for a short period of time, and then they had a falling out. But by the time the trade came out, they had decided that didn't work for canon, and they switched it to he had never been Batman's Robin, but took the name and had to change a bunch of dialogue to make it fit. So if you bought the issue, you knew one canon. But if you bought the trade 6 months later, you knew a different canon. And it was because they were doing New 52 so fast. I remember, I think it's Scott Snyder said, we knew by the time New 52 #1 came out that it was over already. We were already writing the new pitches. We were already writing what came next. So, sometimes they can't even stop themselves from doing the reset right away. And we even think DC's good at the reset. So the fact that sometimes they're not, everybody can make a Dan Didio kind of mistake from time to time. And by that, I mean, assuming that New 52 would actually slap. I think New 52 is the DC era I've read the most of by percentage of how much there is. Mm-hmm. So, on that topic, please, and hop back to Marvel anytime you want. No stopsies.
I'm good.
I even really love Robin and Batman #1. #1, I'm a big Jeff Lemire guy. Essex County, Sweet Tooth, Trillium. This is a guy who I even love his Terrible Extraordinary X-Men, and it's terrible through no fault of his own. Jeff Lemire is a guy who comes in and writes powerfully emotional, expressive stories that challenge the way we think about the identity of masculinity. He expresses vulnerability through demure moments in a really interesting way. he's very good at capturing serenity. So one of the things that's so insane about this book is that he does not do that once here. He does capture vulnerability in masculinity through subtle moments here, especially that Alfred conversation. Dick was marvelous, but this kid is deeply troubled. But Lemire also is somebody who really needs to draw his own work, because even when Humberto Ramos drew him, he didn't really get him. I'm very positive on this. I thought it was beautiful visually. The thing that's hard here is, now I don't think as a person who isn't super duper familiar, you have plenty of familiarity and tons of experience, but somebody who isn't super duper familiar with all the different Robins.
This is the first time I have ever read a story where Jason Todd is Robin. I've read Jason Todd stories. This is, and maybe not, maybe randomly, and I didn't, but this is the first time that I am aware of that I've read a story where Jason Todd is Robin. So we can be very real about that.
Well, I mean, he's behaving exactly like Damien, so I don't know how you'd be able to tell a difference. And half the time they've been writing Tim as Dick. So I don't know. Because they want Jason Todd to now not be a brat. They want him to be edgy, and we're reimagining him edgy, not a brat. We wind up in a weird position. So how did you feel about this? Because I don't think this is exactly a retcon, but this didn't happen, so it has.
Yeah, well, and I like that you titled the episode "Revising Canon," because there is a difference between revising canon and a retcon, and I think that's an important distinction. I think retcons, it's a very we know it when we see it type of thing. You go, oh no, that murder that happened, there was somebody off page that you didn't know about who actually killed the guy, and we're going to tell you that 20 years later because we decided to. Revising canon is sort of, and I might have even, as I was thinking about it, and I said these words earlier, we maybe could have even titled it Revisiting Canon, because a lot of times it's not really even, because ultimately, with the exception of the fact that Kamala was there, not really much has changed about the Dark Phoenix Saga as a result of that story. Even if they say that it happened the way that it happens in this issue, Kamala isn't going to return to the present day Marvel universe, and they're going to go, well, yeah, but Jean has always worn blue and gold, and she's going to be like, it's because I changed time. No, everything is going to have happened how it happened, with the exception that they're going to go, Kamala, you were there too.
Thanks, guys.
And for me, that's kind of, we're revising canon. We're being a little more subtle here. And so one of the things I wondered about was because ultimately Jason, I know, will be killed by the Joker, return as Red Hood, and be very edgy, and like guns. Was he a bad seed Robin?
He was a whiny brat. He was whiny. So there were two characters that people just kept being like, kill them.
Yeah.
And they were Jason Todd and Doug Ramsey. And they killed them both.
Yeah.
And to this day, I don't know what I believe, but they say that there was that phone call in line, and they had already drawn what if Jason Todd survived, which they ultimately printed it years later. But they say that supposedly Jason Todd died by one vote.
Right. It did seem like a big part of this was getting to Alfred being like, that kid is unfixable, which I thought was sort of mean-spirited. It was
a little the macaroni, wasn't it?
Oh my God. It's very difficult to experience Batman at all, having loved Harley Quinn this much. I do think about the macaroni constantly.
Have you seen season 5 yet?
Oh yeah, I'm done.
Venomed out.
Yeah,
the macaroni is the most absurd thing I've ever. It's almost as good as Bane fucking buildings.
I can't stop myself. I'm very glad you showed me that Kite Man Bane strut.
Oh my god, he's gonna be sexiest villain.
Oh yeah, oh.
And I will admit there is even a couple of appearances from Clifford, which makes it worth it. Oh, yeah, and Harley and Ivy show up at one point.
That doesn't surprise me.
The only thing I don't love is that, just side note, some of my favorite villains are literally executed in single like gags. So like in Kite Man, Sinestro was literally turned to dust in a sight gag, and he's not reappeared in the year since.
Yeah,
and like they do the same thing to Eclipso in Harley, and I'm just like, man, they're often some like alpha level villains here. Dang.
Which is only a bummer because you'd just love to see because they're so funny. You'd love to see them like really tackle. I mean, like they unfortunately, well, I'm not gonna say. It's interesting that they have Brainiac. Like it's interesting that they decided to work with Brainiac for this 5th season. But I'll be interested to see what you think of it.
I'm stoked. I'm ready.
But yeah, I mean, it felt a little mean for Alfred to just be like, yeah, we should get rid of this kid. But it's not, revisiting the idea that Jason might have had something in him is interesting to me. I think specifically like going into that zone of having the father figure of the father figure be like, what if you got rid of him? Just feels a little bit okay. Well, now we took it to a weird zone.
Mitchum Huntsberger.
I definitely like the idea that if you're going to say, okay, well, this character will become the Red Hood, interesting to revisit how there might have been little bits of Red Hood in the young kid that was failed by Bruce and was hurt by Joker such that he became that. But like how you might just see little glimpses of it. Ultimately, I think you pointed to another thing, which is like he kind of feels a little bit more like Damien. Like it doesn't feel like I don't see bits of Red Hood here. I just see a zealous Robin who is violent, which again, that's sort of Damien's thing. So it's just it's a little bit confused.
I completely agree, and that's even like part of where I wonder so much about how we look back on characters. I've read every issue of any title called Uncanny X-Men. That's not a brag, that's a confession, right? And so I can tell you Bobby's actually not funny compared to the others because Stan Lee knew one thing, and it's fucking wisecracks, right? That guy, Grandpa, right behind me, he knew one thing, wisecracks. And so everybody is funny the way Bobby is. However, Bobby is juvenilely funny. Hank is intelligently funny. Warren is charmingly funny. Scott's not funny. That's his problem. Gene is even funny. It's specifically Bobby's not funnier than the rest. But he's constantly described as the clown. So then years later, he's not fucking funny because he was never funny. You just called him funny. But like something that I know I brought up on the show a million times, I'm so sorry, longtime listeners. No, I'm not. Is that if you go back and you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer by Foot Pervert, he constantly says from the first appearance that Oz is like so quiet. By Oz's second episode, he is revealing deep truths in moments of loudness that immediately tell you he's not quiet, and they tell you he's quiet so that every episode he can be loud in a dramatic way. And it winds up feeling like that's what's happening with some of these characters over time. I don't know that Dazzler was ever actually freewheeling, fun-loving, and joyful. I've read certainly not every appearance of Dazzler, but I've read her whole series. I've read all of the appearances in that era. Because until the 2000s, when Fagos got to be a little bit more in charge of stuff, there were like 150 appearances. Everybody calm down. And so like Dazzler was never fun and freewheeling. So in all of these flashbacks, how they're going, hi guys, I'm on roller skates. They're referencing like 1 month of storytelling that was never who she was. But because that's what everybody associates with her, we make up that was always the case. There are only 12 issues of New Mutants with Cable. So I don't know. I think we sometimes really do. Like we project this version of the character back through time. We're just Rachel Gray, chrono skimming our favorite version of the character. And I think DC is a little bit guiltier of it than Marvel, because Marvel loves to be like, no, look how much that person's changed. One canon. But DC likes to be like, no, look, the trope of the character exists through every version.
And I guess Jason's really one of the ones that I know the least about to sort of see that here. You know, I'm always interested how various people are going to tackle the idea that, like, should Bruce Wayne be adopting children and then doing this to them? And that almost starts to be the more interesting thing to me. You know, it's particularly odd to me that Bruce is like, oh, you feeling bad, buddy? Let's go throw on our like, you know, that's how he bonds with his kids. And on the one hand, I get it, but on the other hand, it's just like, so is this family therapy? Like, what am I reading here? And so what is this series? Is the next issue Batman and Robin Jason Todd #2, or is it Batman and Robin Dick Grayson?
I believe this is meant to kick off like the way that Batman and Robin is the ongoing title.
Yeah.
And it tells him and Damian now. I think this is Robin and Batman, and it's going to give them an opportunity to tell, like, you know, maybe they'll even do a Stephanie story. You know,
right.
Maybe get crazy. But I believe this is a run of Jason Todd issues.
Okay, so the next one is going to be Jason Todd #2. It's not going to be a different Robin.
That is my belief, and they're going to solve this murder.
Okay, and then they maybe will do another series that would be Dick Grayson later or something.
Yeah, that's my hope.
Okay, I mean, you know, I certainly enjoyed it. Like, for one thing, I thought it was beautiful. Dustin Wen does really gorgeous art. I thought the particular, you know, when I went to go look at his Instagram, because I've seen his work before, I thought going this watercolor with it, I was charmed by it when I read the issue, and then when I remembered some of his other stuff, I was like, oh, maybe we actually do go a little harder on the colors, like, because it's also to the point where there's like so much paper texture that it feels like a 1994 flatbed scan of a comic.
I really get that, especially like the lack of depth.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, like I said, it's really gorgeous. It's not a bad thing. It's just there's a lot happening, and this issue doesn't quite feel like it knows what it wants to be in the first place. So then adding that to the mix maybe doesn't serve the cause the most that anything ever has. Yeah, I don't. This is an interesting one for me because I do know so little about the character, and I will say this. I mean, I feel like if this is true to who Jason Todd was as a Robin, and if I will sort of be able to reflect on this in the future when I read Jason Todd as Red Hood and go sort of like, oh, but that's how he was as Robin, this will have primered me for Jason Todd in a better way than Dark Phoenix Saga will have primered anybody for Dark Phoenix Saga, for Kamala Khan, for even like things that might be getting made up this week, like Kamala and Jean being friends. Like if Kamala and Jean are friends when this is all over and Jean is back on Earth, I don't know that we got a ton to tell us what that friendship is from that one issue.
Especially with the age gap that they would be overcoming, the personal experiences they wouldn't have in common. Like, It would be significant.
Yeah, well, and then, that gets us into the thing of like, well, but what is the age gap? I think it's pretty huge. I think it's 15 years.
Easily.
But there are absolutely times where I think they would say that, Kamala's 19 or 20 and Jean's 28.
I mean, I think it should be like Jean's 38 and Kamala's 18. So
that's exactly what I think. Yes. Yeah. But again, that's another thing where it's like, that's sort of like, that's the other part of revising canon, and the other part, and we keep returning to this topic, but it really is driving me insane. Like, these are things that are worth getting a bit of a hold on to just decide what kind of stories we're telling and who's who. Because again, I really do think like people our age are such a huge part of the comic reading audience. And people younger than us aren't as excited about the characters that we got excited about, that we held on to. They're excited about new characters and younger characters. So we're excited for Jean and Scott, who we see as basically being our age. And if you are, even a younger millennial, you're probably more excited about Miles Morales and Kamala Khan. And we're getting to the point where it's probably time to start making some new heroes. And then I look at like what they do when it's Spider-Boy and Spider-Girl, and I'm like, oh no, you went too far with it. Like, those kids are not reading comics at all. Those kids are reading manga and probably not reading very much in the first place. And I'm just, we ought to be kind of revising canon to allow for everybody to perform at their best as parts of storytelling.
I love that. I mean, I think that's the note to go out on. I think that is, really what we're talking about is that these universes can't go back to what they did, look at them again and say, could we do it better? I don't know, but we could definitely do it again. And we got to be looking at more do it betters, fewer do it agains, and a general helping of why are we doing this?
Yeah, what's our mission here?
And so I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing how both of these miniseries continue to play out. There's 3 more Giant-Size, but we already know that it's getting a spinoff in Age of Apocalypse. We know that there's at least the rest of this miniseries for Robin and Batman, but we know that generally this isn't the end of retcons. This isn't the end of revising canon. And I know that we're going to be looking at a ton more of it because it's going to keep happening as things like Doctor Doom was, I don't know if he was meant to get the Marvel Universe right now and like ride this, press wave about the movies, or if this was planned in the first place and then it just timed out with the movies. But that Doctor Doom is going to be in the movies in 2 years, so the character can't be done now. And so we're going to need to keep going back to that well. And with a character like Doctor Doom, one of the oldest villains in the Marvel Universe, you can only be sure that they're going to have to make some decent changes. And I'm ready for it.
Yeah. I never have a problem with the retcon, and I never have a problem with revising continuity. I think it's part of the fun of comics, but I hold them to high standards, and I want to know what we're doing. What's the purpose? What's going to be made better by doing this? Not just like how do we sneak another issue in and get more sales, but like what can we really do with this enormous, intense project that an entire shared continuity universe is? What is this revision doing for us? How does it serve this enormous structure? And I would love to see one come up soon that makes me go like, oh man, that's going to make cool stories come for years. That's going to establish a baseline to do really cool stories for years to come. And it's just been a minute since I've seen one of those. I mean, again, I think Krakoa was the last really great one that I can think of. Just the idea that they had always been working on this project meant like, okay, well, now we can tell a bunch of great stories. Whether or not they lived up to telling those great stories is a different thing. But for that one moment when you saw that that's what the retcon was, you said to yourself, oh, now this opens up so many possibilities. And I'm waiting for that, because saying there's some dude and his wife who fight in the cosmic background the whole time. That didn't actually lead to many great stories, but man, do we see that dude all the time.
It's one of the reasons that we always need to think about how many people are in charge of these universes. You never want to see it be a million writers, but when it's just one or two people, you really do wind up in the one or two people mode of one or two people doing what they do. So, these universes are so wide and so varied. It just takes a lot of people putting together those ingredients. And speaking of the people who put together those ingredients, Kevo, we could not make this show without your producing. It is so good, and we love you. We think you're amazing. And where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Kevo O'Reilly. That's KEVOREALLY. Sorry, stumbled a bit there because I actually, something TK put a thought in my head when he mentioned we are Gene and Scott's age. And I realized they were literally adults when we were children. And I think that is even a huge part of why this thing of aging characters, it's not just about bringing up new characters and introducing new characters for the new generation. The people who actually grew up with Jean and Grey are, I think, probably older than Xavier by now. That's so weird. Like, we are going to start to get toward Xavier's age and be advanced of Scott and Jean, and they were very far into adulthood when we were kids. And that starts to feel weird after a certain point. So that's why it becomes necessary to make sure you're doing that.
I think that's a great point, Kevo. And thank you so much for sharing it. And I'm going to kick it over to the guy who made the intro leading point. TK, you are the body that rocked the party. And so I am so excited that we had this opportunity to talk about revising canon, to talk about taking a look. And I'm so glad that we did this with a character set that you know so well, like X-Men, and then a character set that maybe you don't have the strongest base in Batman, because it
don't know at all.
Yeah, it gave such like a really full vibe. And so I'd love to get where everybody can find you. And anything you want to throw in, favorite retcon, least favorite retcon, whatever.
You can find me on Blue Sky at TK Accidental. Favorite retcon is absolutely Krakoa. Least favorite retcon, oh Lord, at this point I don't even know. There have just been so many. You pointed to a one that I'm just like, we don't ever need to talk about this again, which is Gambit's involvement in the Mutant Massacre. I don't even know which thing I don't like, that he was there and totally a part of it, or that he was there and not really a part of it and didn't really like, I don't know which one I prefer. I'm sad that we ever got into that, but TK Accidental on Blue Sky. Come and chat me up. Big man, what you got for us?
You already said a great favorite, so I'll say Emma Frost's Diamond Form. And then I'll say least favorite is Franklin's Not a Mutant. You guys can check me out, Nico Action, NICOACTION. You got to check out the music. That's Nico Action Music, NICOACTION. Guys, we love making this show. Come check it out at X's for Comics, X's for Podcast. That's Husbands Talking More or Less as well. You guys can check out all of our amazing feeds, but don't forget to check out our amazing feeds here on YouTube, here at X's for Show. Like, comment, and subscribe. We love it if you guys did those 3 things for us, but 3 things you guys can do for yourselves. Number 1, please stay safe. Crazy world out there. Number 2, please be brave, because it's who you are inside that really matters. But number 3, evolve daily, because who you were yesterday, incredible. Who you are today, amazing. But it's who you are tomorrow that we can't wait to see the most. And so until we come back to see you then, revise your origin however you want and live your best retcon.